These are the barriers. And so what's next? Shelter? There's barriers to that too. I'm going to share that with you guys too, because I want people to go, well, because people go, well, why don't you just go to shelter? Just go to a shelter. Well, there's some things with that too. Let's go to this part.
Yeah, there's places that if you are a Christian and if you're not under the influence of anything at all,
right.
They'll test you for a cigarette.
We do have one shelter gospel.
Okay, so first of all, let's go there. First of all, you have to be Christian. Not everybody is religious. And to the people who may be religious, not everybody is Christian. And even some Christian denominations don't worship the same way. So a Presbyterian doesn't worship the same as a Baptist, and a Baptist doesn't worship the same as a Catholic, and a Catholic doesn't worship exactly the same as a Jehovah's Witness. And a Jehovah's Witness doesn't worship the same as a Mormon. And what if you say, I'm just spiritual? I don't like organized religion. But now they're forcing you into an organized religion in order to be able to stay someplace. On top of that, you can't have a substance abuse. But here's the problem, and this is a raw truth. Do you know that a lot of homeless people, a lot of unhoused people, they actually get addicted to drugs after becoming homeless? Why? Because they're homeless. I have a confession to make. Last week, I neglected an opportunity to help someone homeless while on my way home from dialysis. The paratransit service had an account with a company that sends a car rather than the usual van. The car is kind of like an Uber. I just paid a copay and ride home. At the stoplight, there was an older homeless man that was asking for money. The first time he came to the door was on the right side. The driver purposefully pulled forward when he got to the window. I guess the man didn't realize that he was doing that to avoid him. So the homeless man approaches the driver's side and the driver pulls forward again. No acknowledgement of his presence. No, I'm sorry, I don't have it. No humanity. I just sat there in fear of making the driver angry if I rolled down the window and gave a couple dollars to the man, the couple dollars that I had in my bag, to this guy that was sitting out there that was unhoused. I usually never keep cash in my bag. And I felt like the universe was telling me to be an example to that driver. But I failed. I totally failed. And as I saw that homeless man sit on the curb with his head in his hands, I wanted to cry. The light immediately turns green and my heart sinks. I can't believe I allowed my fear to get the best of me. I say this because it's a new year. And I'm going to try to do my best to be brave in my revolutionary example. Be fearless in love and justice. I still am a work in progress. And I hope that by sharing my transgression, it will all encourage you guys to do better, to be better. Homelessness is an important topic to me because I know what it's like to be unhoused. This is why I became angry at this headline from the Associated Press. Let me share my screen so you guys can see. U.S. homelessness up 18% as affordable housing remains out of reach for many people. This came out on the 27th of December. The United States saw an 18.1% increase in homelessness this year, a dramatic rise driven mostly by lack of affordable housing, as well as devastating natural disasters and a surge of migrants in several parts of the country, federal officials said Friday. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development said federally required tallies taken across the country in January found that more than 770,000 people were counted as homeless, a number that misses some people and does not include those staying with friends or family because they do not have a place of their own. So with that being said, the fact that you have 770,000 people, now they typically count the homeless population, they typically choose a day in the year, which is just a snapshot. It doesn't account for everybody that's unhoused. It's typically counting the people who are out in the streets. This doesn't count the people who are in motels. This doesn't count the people who are sleeping on your couch. This just doesn't count the people who are sleeping in other places under duress. And remember, we talked about what being under duress really means, right? It's not really a free choice. It's a very limited choice that holds you to under pressure, right? Under coercion, under force. And so because of this, it doesn't really give the real scope of how many people who are unhoused. It could be children, it could be women and children. I've seen women and children that have been homeless. I remember when Rome came down here to do a tour for the poor, and we encountered a homeless family, husband, wife, 3 kids. One of the youngest was still in diapers. And they had a puppy. Here's the thing. Homelessness happens to many people. And it happens because things arise. Difficulty arises. But that difficulty is really due to the system. And I can get into that a little bit later. But that's how extreme it is. 18.1% rise in homelessness, especially since we saw a rise in homelessness the year prior. Let's continue. It says that increase comes on top of a 12% increase in 2023, which HUD blamed on soaring rents and the end of the pandemic assistance. The 2023 increase also was driven by people experiencing homelessness for the first time. The numbers overall represent 23 out of every 10,000 people in the US, with Black people being overrepresented among the homeless population. Let's stop right there and let's just dwell on this for a second, right? So when you're saying that we had a 12% increase in 2023 and then another 18% increase on top of that in 2024, you can see how we jumped from over 500,000 to over 770,000, meaning that the homelessness rate jumped almost 50%. That's a massive, massive jump. That's an explosion of homelessness, driven by people experiencing homelessness for the first time. Why? Because soaring rents and end of pandemic assistance, meaning the problem is money. It's not some individual problem, because if it was an individual problem, it wouldn't happen as to great of a degree. The issue is it's a systemic issue. Let me continue because I don't want to get on a tangent, a rant right now, because I feel it coming on. So let's continue here. Among the most concerning trends was nearly 40% rise in family homelessness. One of the areas that was most affected by the arrival of migrants in big cities. Family homelessness more than doubled 13 communities impacted by migrants, including Denver, Chicago, New York City, according to HUD. While it rose less than 8% in remaining 373 communities, nearly 150,000 children experienced homelessness on a single night in 2024, reflecting 33% jump from last year. 33%. That's a third. Kids. I'm going to say something controversial. And what I say, I don't mean to be mean. And what I say, I don't mean to be contentious. But you worrying about somebody in drag reading to a child is less of a worry to me than kids being homeless out in these streets. You're worried about some makeup and a dress, and I'm worried about if kids are able to eat and they don't die from hypothermia. We're not the same. And that's the thing. We can be the same if we start to prioritize material conditions, especially. But the thing is like, also another thing is the migrant issue. And I'm not going to tackle it like the way you think. If we were not destabilizing the countries in the global south and causing people to migrate from their country because of the economic conditions, which influence the social conditions in these countries because of what our country wants to do in that destabilization, they wouldn't be flocking here, which means it wouldn't put a strain on the services that we need to house American citizens who are also homeless. It's a process, baby. There's levels to this. And the problem is that the corporate dictators, the ruling class, the owner class, they want that free labor. They got to have that cheap and free labor that comes in from the southern border, right? We're already seeing the free and cheap labor that they have coming off the planes for the H-1B visas, right? So that they can pay them, way lower than they would pay Americans because they want to exploit them because they can't necessarily fight for a higher wage. They can't protest. They can't join a union and go on strike. Because if they do, then guess what? Either the ones that are highly skilled with the H-1B visas or the ones that come from the southern border that are working in construction or agriculture, if they come in, then guess what? They get deported, all right? Or they lose their visa status. And then on top of it, because some of them are also homeless, then guess what? It puts a greater strain on the homeless provisions that we have within our municipalities in this country. And what does it do? It sets a battle, proletariat versus proletariat, worker versus worker, poor person versus poor person. And who's fighting who? It's the poor people fighting the poor people. When in reality, neither group has power. Neither group has put each other in that situation. It was the allowance of the owner class that actually made that happen. This is why it's important to look at things from a macro level. Get 30,000 feet up in the air and see the forest for what it is. Let's continue. Disasters also played a part in the rise in the count, especially last year's catastrophic Maui fire, the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. More than 5,200 people were staying in emergency shelters in Hawaii on the night of the count. Let's also not forget what happened in Asheville, North Carolina. Hurricane Helene happened. How many of those people are homeless because of a hurricane that happens in an area that typically doesn't get hurricanes. So of course FEMA's not doing a damn thing that they should. So yeah. And that's one of the biggest parts. That also helps contribute to what's going on. What about Hurricane Milton that hit here in Florida, especially the West Coast? People who don't have homes, people who've lost their homes, who now have to shack up with relatives and loved ones. These are different variables that we have to talk about. Where's FEMA for them? Increased homelessness is the tragic yet predictable consequence of underinvesting in the resources and protections that help people find and maintain safe, affordable housing. So it says, as advocates, researchers, and people who with lived experience have warned, the number of people experiencing homelessness continues to increase as more people struggle to afford sky-high housing costs. Remember, we talked about, according to the Low Income Housing Coalition, that out of reach, article, which actually shows the ranking of some of the most expensive states where it is to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Here in Florida, Florida is the 10th most expensive state in the country. We're talking about a red state in the South that is the 10th most expensive state to live in. And also, in addition to, and furthermore, as more people migrate to these cheaper states, guess what happens? Our cost of living goes up. Because you have what I like to call more localized gentrification, and now we're having what I like to call intrastate gentrification, meaning people from more expensive states who have a more expensive cost of living are moving to states where the cost of living is cheaper, but it's driving up our cost of living. And now, guess what? We can't afford to live. Because here in Florida, especially here in our places like Orlando, people from Michigan, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, they're all moving down here because the cost of living is cheaper, because they may have made their coin up north and said, you know what, I can probably live down there and still make the same amount, but I can live in a more cost-effective way. But then, guess what? Who's raising their prices in order to make more? It's the property managers, right? It's the real estate developers. So now, if you want a decent house, you're going to be spending $420,000 to $480,000 just for your standard beginner house in Central Florida. Maybe more. The condo that I just left, I didn't own it. But when I first moved in 2013, they were trying to sell it for $30,000. Now it's on the market for $165,000. 10 and a half years. 10 and a half years, from $30,000 to $165,000 for a 2-bedroom condo in Orange County. This is why people are going homeless. This is why the homeless rate is jumping. This is also something I want to address too. It says the numbers also come as increasing number of communities are taking a hardline stance against homelessness. Communities, especially in Western states, have been enforcing bans on camping as public pressure grows to address what some residents say are the dangerous and unsanitary living conditions. That follows a 6-3 ruling earlier this year by the Supreme Court that found that outdoor sleeping bans don't violate the 8th Amendment. Homeless advocates argued that punishing people who need a place to sleep would criminalize homelessness. And we're going to get deeper into that in a little bit. Says there was so they talk about some positive news about homeless veterans actually going down. But it's still sad because veterans should not be homeless, especially after serving the country. Right. And so look here. It says the number of homeless people dropped from about 637,000 in 2010 to 554,000 in 2017. But the numbers ticked up about 580,000 in 2020 count and held relatively steady over the next 2 years as Congress responded to COVID-19 pandemic with emergency rental assistance, stimulus payments, aids to states and local governments, and temporary eviction moratorium. So when people say when it comes to homelessness, you can't just throw money at the problem, yes, you can. How do you end homelessness, JB? You give them homes. It's like, how do you end hunger? Give people food. Let them eat. And then they won't be hungry no more. And the thing is, people go, well, it's not that simple. It is that simple. Here's the thing about the capitalist system. They want to make things so complex so that you just give up and say, and put up your hands or wash your hands and go, you know what? It's too complex. We can't do it. You're just going to have to be individualistic and depend on yourself. When in reality, the answers are really that simple. They just don't want you to know. So when it comes to that article, I was upset because I did not like to see an increase in homelessness, though I knew it was inevitable. I had a feeling, right? And so I want to ask the chat, what do you think the homelessness rate will be in 2025? By the time we reach the end of December in 2025, what do you think the number is going to be? I'd say that the number will go up another 15% or greater. I think we're going to reach about 850,000 homeless by December. This is because the corporations, they need homeless people so they can arrest and jail them to have more potential slave labor. Let me share this video. This is a great channel. If you're not following this channel, it's called Invisible People. I highly recommend that you guys follow this channel. I will give you guys the link in the chat. But let's just go over just a couple of points in this. I'm not going to play the entire one, but I just want to go over a few points.
The homelessness epidemic is inescapable. Enforcing its ban on homeless people.
Is there nowhere else to go? Is there just nowhere else that they want to go?
Our city deserves to hold people accountable to bad behavior.
Voters fed up with rising homelessness.
Clear them out.
The push to ship out, arrest, and get homeless people out of sight is gaining alarming support across the U.S.
Criminalizing sleeping in public spaces.
And in the coming months, protections against criminalization may be overturned in the Supreme Court.
Do I protect myself from the elements and risk going to jail, or do I not and risk hypothermia and dying?
So is it cruel and unusual punishment? The Supreme Court will tackle that question.
At the center is a small town in Oregon.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Invisible People founder Mark Horvath investigates what's really going on in Grants Pass right now.
We get a ticket just for trying to live.
30 citations in a year and a half.
I've been to jail 5 times just this year.
So this park is probably the most controversial.
They hit me with a stick. They wanted to drag them out and beat them.
Families out here sleeping in tents.
because this ruling will determine whether cities can arrest homeless people across the country.
If that's allowed, many cities will try to run all of the homeless people out of their community.
The stakes can be higher.
We will ban urban camping. Violators of these bans will be arrested. We will then open up large parcels of inexpensive land where the homeless can be relocated.
Rather than addressing the structural inequities causing homelessness, many politicians from both parties and at all levels ignore proven solutions to homelessness, opting instead for a punitive response that will only make homelessness worse and hurt all of us. Criminalization punishes the one group of people who have no power to fix the crisis.
The GPPD had my stuff thrown away, and in one of my totes was my son's urn. My son's forever gone, and I only have a piece of him, an urn necklace that I keep dear to my heart, you know, like that's things I can't get back. It makes it really hard to want to keep going on. All I can say to people is don't forget what it is to be human. Be kind. We're all just trying to survive.
If your issue is that Black Lives Matter, if you care about the experience of LGBTQ people, if you care about people living with disabilities, if you care about the elderly, all of these traditionally marginalized communities are going to be impacted. If those are your issues, this is your issue.
So let's stop right there for a second, because he actually talks about different groups, right? Different marginalized groups that are affected by homelessness. You cannot have a liberation. You cannot have a truly free country if the barriers to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are paywall. I said what I said. Which means that things like housing, healthcare, education, food, healthy food, clean water, and a sustainable environment have to be, yes, given. I'm saying it. It has to be given because you are a human being. Because if you think that it can't, and people will say, well, you can't just, nothing's for free. No shit, Sherlock. But yet we can give roads and bridges for free, right? You can ride on these roads and bridges, right? And what do you do in order to have those roads and bridges? You pay what? Taxes, meaning that we actually pull our resources together and then we share among the community. Right? We can have fire service whenever our fire alarm goes off and the fire department comes to take out the fire in our houses. We can go to the library and see librarians and check out books, right? Without having to pay a fee in order to be able to read and get educated or even to entertain ourselves. You can order board games, you can get movies, you can get all these things at a local library. So if we can do these things, can we do healthcare? Can we do housing? Education? I'd rather my money go to housing people than to bombing little brown children abroad. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be nice? Let's continue. Just to go over a couple things in this video.
We knew we had to go where it all started, and with the boots on the ground, we met up with co-founder of Mint, the mobile integrated navigation team, who does outreach and bridges the gap for the houseless in Josephine County.
Good morning, sunshine. Did you take your medicine? Do you need water? I'll grab you some water, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Homelessness in Grants Pass. We're seeing new people each week out here. A lot of elderly who are being forced out of their home, foreclosures, etc. A lot of them have been out here for a long time. There are people out here.
Oh, a lot of elderly. A lot of boomers. Remember when I talked about that last year? About how the homeless rate is jumping among the boomers? They're being foreclosed on their homes. Anybody else talk about that? How elderly people, their retirement savings are running out. Your retirement savings are supposed to last until you die, until you naturally pass on. But their retirement savings are running out because they didn't account for the spike in inflation that has been caused by the owner class. It's not something just naturally occurring because it's free markets. No. It is corporate price gouging that has caused them to lose their homes. This is what's happening. And a lot of people don't talk about it, but a lot of elderly people are literally becoming homeless. Mama and daddy, they ain't got a home no more. Why? Because the taxes were too high, or they had to take out a second mortgage, or they got disabled.
Here being ticketed to move their tent site when the city hasn't given them an alternative solution to be able to be that safe. There are no affordable housing or low barrier shelters, and rent keeps going up and up. And so we're seeing more and more folks having to live in the parks or in parking lots with their cars. That's where the city's kind of designated places for them right now.
But even in these designated areas, they must move to a new park every 3 or 5 days. And even then, once they settle back in, they're often still not left in peace.
The cops give us tickets for any reason they can find. Scattering rubbish, being in the buffer zone, tent being too big, like you name it, I've gotten a ticket for it. I got my notice this morning. I have to move. Having to move every week is ridiculous in itself, that you have to pack up your whole camp, everything, your food, your clothes, your bedding, and it doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, whatever, we have to move. If we're there when we're supposed to be moved, we get a ticket for being there. It's hell to move from park to park. It seems like every single time you get to your tent or get your camp set up and start getting things livable again, it's time to move again. They have made it impossible to feel human just because we're homeless. Like, we're not supposed to exist. We get a ticket just for trying to live.
Where are you staying at?
Right over here. This is the home for the week. Here at what we call Tent City. I'm hoping that my 30-day kickout is going to be over so I can go to the park down the street, because it's easier to move a few blocks than it is like clear across town, you know. My bike trailer and wagon have flat tires and I can't afford tubes. So that it makes it difficult to move for sure. I have food stamps, but that don't give us enough to last a month, especially when we can't cook food. We have to go buy things we can heat in the microwave at the store. I do what I can.
This is another variable, right? So, number one, a lot of these states do not give enough in food stamps. Trust me, I know, I get food stamps. They don't give us enough. And for somebody that's unhoused, you need food to survive. You cannot live without food. And so some of them do get food stamps, but isn't it easier? Isn't it cheaper to cook your own food? But what if you can't cook because you're in a tent? And never mind that a lot of the city ordinances, you can't have any type of cooking elements while in an urban area camping. You can't. That's illegal because they will take you to jail for that, because there's a fire hazard. So what do they have to eat? They got to eat canned stuff, perishable stuff that's not the most healthy, that's full of preservatives and chemicals. So they're already not eating healthy because they can't afford it. They got to get stuff that doesn't spoil so easily. Also, remember, some of these people who are unhoused are also disabled. So some of them also have dietary restrictions, which means that they can only spend so much on food, which means that if they go to, say, Coalition for the Homeless or another type of, not Coalition for the Homeless, but if they go to a food bank or something like that, They have to get what the food bank gives them. They can't pick or choose because, right, you know what they say, beggars can't be choosers, right? So they have to, take what they give, what they can get. And what if this person has celiac disease? What if this person is diabetic? Or what if they have texture limitations, meaning that maybe they might be missing teeth or have very sensitive teeth or teeth that's easy to break, and they have to eat different types of foods? What if they have no teeth? What if they have dentures? Do you see some of the variables? And so they're unable to eat healthy like they really want to because they can't cook. They can't even have hot food. Food stamps here in Florida, this is one of the most messed up things here in Florida. You can't get hot food on food stamps. So let's say I go to a Publix, right? And they have hot meals right there ready for you to eat in Publix that they prepared. I can't go in there and get a hot meal of maybe some chicken tenders, maybe some green beans, some mashed potatoes, some corn. I can't get that. But I also, in that same store, can go to the deli and get a cold cut sub with those same food stamps. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. I can get cold, or if they fried chicken the day before, but then they're selling it cold in the cold section, I can get that fried chicken with food stamps. So this is the war on homelessness, on poverty that goes on within our country. And then on top of that, for those of us who are disabled, every single time we get a cost of living increase, which we just did, guess what? Our food stamps go down because they don't want us to live life high on the hog, right? Off the money of the state, even though they're getting millions of dollars of subsidies and tax breaks to the billionaires and millionaires. Billionaires like Donald Trump, because yes, his residence is here in Florida. That's homelessness.
Make the best of it.
Amber has received over 30 citations in a year and a half. Each one is $295. She has no way of paying them. I can't imagine any community having a response to homelessness, just pushing people from park to park. It makes no sense. The only solution to tents in a park is housing. Criminalization will just make these encampments grow. More people will end up in the park.
And we wondered, where is this push for criminalization coming from? So we asked an expert from the National Homelessness Law Center.
Our organization has been tracking the criminalization of homelessness for the past 20 years. We found these ordinances have been growing as visible homelessness continues to expand in our communities. So Grants Pass, like much of America, is experiencing a homelessness crisis caused by the lack of affordable housing. Since the early 2000s, Grants Pass has more than doubled in size, but it hasn't doubled its affordable housing stock. The vacancy rate is less than 1%, meaning if you lose your apartment, it's basically impossible to find a new one. As landlords,
So, that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is now on top of it, the apartments within our area are too expensive to move into. On top of that, you got to remember, if you don't have an ID, you can't get an apartment. If you don't have a social security number, you can't get an apartment. If your credit is below a certain level, you can't get an apartment. If you have a criminal record, you can't get an apartment, right? So those are just some of the barriers. If you don't have an income, because you got to be able to show your pay stubs or show your bank statements to show that you get a regular paycheck, because you got to make 3 times the rent in order to be able to get an apartment. So all these different things, like you can have all the things that you have, but if your credit's not good, then you still can't get an apartment. These are the barriers. And so what's next? Shelter? There's barriers to that too. I'm going to share that with you guys too, because I want people to go, well, because people go, well, why don't you just go to shelter? Just go to a shelter. Well, there's some things with that too. Let's go to this part.
Yeah, there's places that if you are a Christian and if you're not under the influence of anything at all,
Right.
they'll test you for a cigarette.
We do have one shelter gospel.
Okay, so first of all, let's go there. First of all, you have to be Christian. Not everybody is religious. And to the people who may be religious, not everybody is Christian. And even some Christian denominations don't worship the same way. So a Presbyterian doesn't worship the same as a Baptist, and a Baptist doesn't worship the same as a Catholic, and a Catholic doesn't worship exactly the same as a Jehovah's Witness. And a Jehovah's Witness doesn't worship the same as a Mormon. And what if you say, I'm just spiritual? I don't like organized religion. But now they're forcing you into an organized religion in order to be able to stay someplace. On top of that, you can't have a substance abuse. But here's the problem, and this is a raw truth. Do you know that a lot of homeless people, a lot of unhoused people, they actually get addicted to drugs after becoming homeless? Why? Because they're homeless. You know, some substances, I can't be specific, but some substances keep you awake so that you don't fall asleep, so that people don't steal your stuff, so that you are safe because there are people who may try to SA you, try to sexually assault you, especially if you're a female. It happens if you're a male too. So that on top of dealing with the trauma as well as the thing, oh my God, it's horrible. So this is part of it. Let me continue this because I really want to hammer this home, because people think that shelters are a solution. They're not, because they gatekeep in many different ways as well.
Rescue mission, but it would be high barrier, and a lot of the people that we serve don't really meet the criteria to be admitted there or deny wanting to go there.
It's like being in jail. You can't talk to anybody, you can't leave, and it's being locked up in there doing nothing but chores and pray to the Lord. And you can't have your animals. There's a lot of people that have dogs, and it's comfort zone for them. Same with my cat.
You would go into a shelter or housing if there was, provided dignity and you could take your cat.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
One newspaper article said there's 27 rules for the gospel rescue.
For example, I had a family that was new to being out here, 2 young kids, mom and dad. Mom and kids had to go separately. Dad had to go to another place, and they couldn't see each other for 30 days. No smoking, no dogs, no drugs whatsoever. They also have to be physically able to work. So if they have a disability that prevents them from being able to work, then they aren't qualified to go to the shelter.
So you can't even be disabled. A huge chunk of people who are homeless are actually disabled. And you heard what he said, that a family with a father, the father can't stay with the family. I'm gonna tell you guys a little story about my family. So when we moved down here to Florida back in 1987, yes, I am that old. We were living with a friend, her and her daughter. Soon after, a few months of us living with her, she ups and leaves and moved back up to Jersey. Just ups and leaves. Where did that leave my mom and 3 boys? Well, my mother had to be homeless with her 3 sons. She had a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 12-year-old. So with that being said, by the time we got into a shelter, they told my mother that because my oldest brother was between the ages of 12 and 13, he couldn't stay with us. They wanted him to go into the men's shelter by himself. 12, 13-year-old boy having to stay in a men's shelter by himself? These are the barriers. These are the barriers that they will place in front of you if you're homeless. And so this is why I talk about these things, because number one, lived experience, but number two, this shouldn't be. So I can't show this entire thing, because the reason being is because it's too long, and this stream will be like 4 hours long if I completely react to this. But this is some of the things that a lot of people do not consider. But I want you to consider this while I'm sharing this with you, because when it comes to homelessness, this is what happens. And so there's one more thing that I want to share. I want to share in regards to this homelessness. Let me see. And I want to make this point too. So let me share this.
Parks and on a path out of homelessness.
So we started with apartments. We have some group housing. We have low barrier.
Oh, sorry. I went back a little too far. Okay. Let's go 1720.
That speaks to the desire to be indoors.
We are in Medford, a neighboring city right next to Grants Pass. Medford has partnered with nonprofits to create solutions to get people out of the parks. And
so here's the thing, he mentions nonprofits, right? And I have something to say about nonprofits. Now, what I'm going to say about nonprofits, and this is not indicative of all nonprofits, but the nonprofit industrial complex uses the plight of homeless people to make more money to serve themselves. Why? Because if homelessness ends, so does their organization. Let me share this right here, because this also is important. Because there's always somebody who needs to benefit from the plight of others. Let's get into it. Thank you to James Lee. Says homelessness keeps going up because the people being tasked with serving it don't have any incentive to do so. Solving it don't have any incentive to do so. Case in point, the LA Homeless Services Authority has a payroll of over $62 million in 2023, with 165 quote unquote public administrators making a 6-figure salary. $62 million payroll. Look. And so to end homelessness would end their jobs. What incentive do they have to end homelessness? See, this is why the nonprofit industrial complex also, we got to yoke them up too. This is why we talk about mutual aid. Because mutual aid doesn't place barriers in front of a person in order to receive help. However, charities, which is part of the nonprofit industrial complex, oh, they do. And they means test. So this is another variable, right? Remember when I think somebody was talking about, I think it was the Red Cross. Was it the Red Cross in Lahaina, where they built like 6 houses with like $5 million? It's like, where did all that money go? I thought you were supposed to be building houses for the unhoused. It's a money laundering scheme. I'm not saying this about all nonprofits, but there are some who are tasked with making it look like they're doing something altruistic, but they're still feeding the system so that they can still be fed. They're still parasitic on the system. They're still parasitic on the society so that they can feed off of it. So that they can get your donations and say, oh, we're helping the homeless. But really, a lot of the people in the upper parts of these organizations are making 6-figure salaries. And they're going to their homes being warm at night. And how many people are actually being helped? Meanwhile, next week, we got a polar vortex that's coming down here. And I think the high in Orlando, Florida is going to be somewhere around 37 degrees. In Orlando, Florida. So that's another variable that a lot of people don't think about, is the nonprofit industrial complex. Here's the truth. Homelessness is a tool used by the owner class to keep workers in line so that they keep because they accept their exploitation. This also gives corporations the stock of slave labor that they can use to make arrests to manufacture goods and services in this country. Remember, just because it says made in America, it doesn't mean it was made by free workers. Cotton shirts were made in America as well in the 1700s, but we all know how we got that cotton, don't we? The 13th Amendment still allows for slavery as parts of punishment for a crime. But what if you make sleeping in tents in urban areas a crime? What if you make sleeping on the sidewalk a crime? This is a modern day vagrancy law. Let's take a look at vagrancy, shall we? If you don't know what it is, we're about to tell you.
Vagrancy law.
That's all right.
All unemployed people should be in jail. That's what vagrancy laws were. After the Civil War, a black man could be incarcerated for the fake crime of vagrancy with no hope of defending himself against a white jury or a white judge. The fees imposed were so great that the black person couldn't have paid it off with a year's worth of work. So that person was convicted, that convict was then leased to other companies, and those companies would pay the fees of that particular convict. The problem? Most of those people never lived long enough to pay off their debt.
I want to tell you guys something. One of the biggest demographics I actually see whenever I do mutual aid, especially in my area in Orlando, is Black men that are unhoused, that are homeless. Black men. And most of them are not immigrants. They're Black American men. American descendants of slavery. The video that I showed at the outset was a lot of white people. When I say if they do it to us, they're going to do it to you, guess what? It's already happening to y'all too. This is why the system needs to end. When we say Black people are the canary in the coal mine, now you know. Because the vagrancy laws were applied to people that look like me, to my ancestors. And now the vagrancy laws are now being applied to white people. This is why we also have to walk away from anti-Blackness. We have to walk away from xenophobia. We got to walk away from queerphobia. We got to walk away from all these things and actually have solidarity with the people who are out in these streets who are literally trying to survive. You actually have more in common with somebody who is out here in these streets in these tents than you do with an Elon Musk, a Harlan Crow, or a Jeff Bezos. You have way more in common with them. And yet we're going to look down our nose at them. And for me to feel fear that the driver was going to get mad at me for rolling down my window and put a couple bucks outside the window and be like, here you go, bro. And by the way, the homeless man that I should have given some money to when I had the opportunity to, he was a Black man. Looked like he was old enough to be my own father. And out of fear, I said, oh, I don't know. I don't want to make him mad. I don't want to get the driver mad, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm a client. Who cares? If he gets mad, then don't pick me up no more. Shit. That man's unhoused. And you don't even want to acknowledge his presence? You just want to pull forward? Allowing the system to devoid you of your humanity just because of a circumstance that you may not even know? Or you think that, oh, I got it out. I got out of it. Not everybody's built the same. And that's okay too. People have different experiences. Some people are good at certain things and some people are not good at certain things. One more thing I want to share. Because I don't want to go too, I went long enough on this, but you got to humanize the marginalized people in order to be able to have compassion. You have to humanize them. I want to share this. This is out of ProPublica. This article says, I have lost everything. Interviews by Asia Fields, Nicole Santa Cruz, Ruth Talbot, and Myra Miller, design and development. So let's share. It says a record number of Americans are living outside. Cities have responded by removing encampments from public spaces, a practice commonly referred to as sweeps. And the process, workers are often taking people's belongings, including important documents, survival gear, and irreplaceable mementos. Over and over, people across this country told ProPublica that they were devastated by such losses. We gave them note cards so that they could explain in their own words how the sweeps had affected them. So here's some of their stories. This is some of the stories that they wrote. So, it says, what is something that is important to you that was taken during the sweep? How has this impacted you? This is from Teresa. Her age is 61 years old. She says, my husband's ashes. It made me feel, it made me feel alone and scared, empty. Now I wonder where he is and if he's all still in his urn and if he's okay. And I hope he's not in the dump. That hurts, man. That hurts. Another one. This is from Adam. He said, my prescription glasses were taken. I have been getting headaches. My CD players, phones, personal paperwork had no time replacing it. Also, jewelry was taken, food, clothes. This has affected me because they just come and throw our stuff away and they just don't care, like it was nothing to them. Thank you. Another one. Mario says, my tools, because I use them to make a living. Not to mention some of those tools were given to me by my father. And they made me feel close to my dad that is now gone because he passed away. But what really sucks is I used them to make a living so I could eat and buy what I need. What are people constantly telling homeless people? Get a job. Did you know that over between 40 and 60% of unhoused people are employed? They have jobs. Just because they're homeless doesn't mean they're unemployed. Two more. Kyra says, updated pictures of my daughter and the only number to reach her at. I've been coping by not continuing my housing. I have nothing to get off the streets to. Elijah says, birth certificate, passport, UPS storage keys, money, ID, social security card. Set my progress to saving for a place back months. Do you know how hard it is to get your birth certificate? You got to literally get in touch with the vital statistics, and then you got to pay a fee in order to get your birth certificate. And then you have to take that birth certificate to go get your social security card. And then once you get your social security card, then you can go get your ID or license, which also is another fee. Because you can't get a job without these things. You can't get housing without these things. You can't get assistance without these things. And when the police come and then they take your belongings and throw them away, then what? This is why we got to humanize these people and see ourselves in them, because if we don't, then we won't change the system. A lot of people are struggling more than you know. Some people are living in their cars and you wouldn't know it until you paid attention. Some people working at places like the happiest place on earth, Walt Disney World. This country is cooked. It's either going to go two ways. One, it's either going to be a fascist revolution that will place corporations in more power than they already have, or two, a socialist revolution that will rip the power from the corporations and put it in the hands of the workers. I'm working for the latter. So this is why we talk about doing mutual aid and working in order to build dual power so that we can help our neighbors who are the most vulnerable so that they can live and actually thrive. Because guess what? Some of these people, they can catch hypothermia, they can catch heat stroke, and they can die. And the thing is like, are we looking forward to that? Who are we? They're human beings. That should be just enough. I hope you connect with your humanity too. So then this never happens to you. So that we can have a system where it never happens. Let's take care of our fellow human beings, shall we? Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much. and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.